Hold on to your helmets because I'm about to tell you something that's going to make modern bike fanboys absolutely furious. After 4 decades of riding motorcycles, working on engines, and watching this industry evolve, I've come to a controversial conclusion that most people don't want to hear. Modern motorcycles are worse than 1980s bikes. I know what you're thinking. This old guy is stuck in the past, hates progress, probably still uses a rotary phone. But before you click away, let me give you the hard evidence that proves why the golden age of motorcycling ended 40 years ago. Today's bikes are faster, more powerful, and packed with technology. But they're also more fragile, more expensive to maintain, impossible to repair yourself, and frankly, less enjoyable to ride. I'm going to show you exactly why that 1985 Honda VF1000R sitting in your neighbor's garage is a better motorcycle than the $25,000 Techno Marvel sitting in the showroom today. This isn't nostalgia talking. This is experience, data, and the hard truth about what we've lost in our pursuit of perfection. The 1980s represented the perfect storm in motorcycle development. Manufacturers had figured out reliability after the disasters of the 1970s, but they hadn't yet gone crazy with electronics, emissions regulations, and lawyer-driven design. Think about what we had in the 80s, the Honda VF series, Yamaha FJ1100, Kawasaki Ninja 900, Suzuki GSX R750. These bikes offered genuine performance, bulletproof reliability, and that intangible quality we've completely lost today, soul. A 1985 Honda VF1000R made 122 horsepower and weighed 470 pounds. Compare that to a modern Honda CB1000RR that makes 189 horsepower but weighs 448 pounds. Sure, the new bike is faster, but at what cost? The 1985 bike cost $4,200 new. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $12,000 in today's money. The modern CBR costs $17,000. So we're paying 40% more for a bike that's fundamentally less reliable and infinitely more complex. But numbers only tell part of the story. The real difference is in the experience, the character, and the relationship between rider and machine that modern bikes have completely abandoned. Modern motorcycles aren't motorcycles anymore. They're computers on wheels, and computers break in ways that no roadside mechanic can fix. I was talking to a rider last month whose 2023 BMW R1250 GS died completely because a sensor failed. Not the engine, not the transmission, not anything mechanical. A $20 sensor killed a $20,000 motorcycle. The bike wouldn't start, wouldn't even turn over because the computer decided something wasn't perfect. He had to have it towed 200 miles to a BMW dealer who needed 3 days to diagnose the problem and 2 weeks to get the part. Compare that to my 1982 Honda CB750. When something goes wrong, which is rare, I can diagnose it with basic tools and fix it with parts from any motorcycle shop in America. No computers, no software updates, no proprietary diagnostic equipment required. The electronic complexity of modern bikes creates multiple failure points that didn't exist in the 80s. Throttle-by-wire systems, multiple ECUs, CAN bus networks, and sensor arrays that can shut down the entire motorcycle if one component fails. In the 1980s, a bike either ran or it didn't. If it didn't run, you could usually figure out why and fix it. Today's bikes can fail in hundreds of ways that require dealer-level diagnostics and programming. Here's a real-world example. A friend's 2024 Yamaha MT-09 developed a throttle position sensor fault. The bike would still run, but it was stuck in limp mode, limiting power to about 40 horsepower. The dealer wanted $400 just to diagnose the problem, plus parts and labor. My 1984 Yamaha FJ1100 has never had a throttle position sensor because it doesn't need one. The throttle is connected directly to the carburetors with a cable. Simple, reliable, and maintainable by anyone with basic mechanical skills. Remember when you could work on your own motorcycle? When a basic toolkit and a shop manual were all you needed to keep your bike running? Those days are gone forever, and we're all poorer for it. Modern motorcycles require specialized tools, proprietary software, and dealer-level access just to perform basic maintenance. Want to change the air filter on some new bikes? You need to remove half the bodywork and sometimes even reset the ECU afterward. I recently watched a mechanic spend 2 hours replacing a headlight bulb on a modern adventure bike because it required removing the front fairing, the windscreen, and part of the instrument cluster. On my 1980s bikes, headlight replacement is a 5-minute job with no tools required. The maintenance intervals have gotten longer, but the costs have skyrocketed. A modern bike might need service every 6,000 miles instead of 3,000, but that service now costs $800 instead of $200 because it requires computer diagnostics, software updates, and specialized procedures. Even worse is the parts situation. When something breaks on a 1980s bike, aftermarket parts are usually available and reasonably priced. When something breaks on a modern bike, you're often stuck with expensive OEM parts because aftermarket companies can't reverse engineer the integrated electronics. A replacement ECU for a modern sport bike can cost $2,000 or more. The entire ignition system on my 1983 Honda VF750F cost $150 to rebuild and will outlast the bike itself. The motorcycle industry loves to talk about how much more reliable modern bikes are. They point to longer service intervals, better materials, and improved manufacturing tolerances. But reliability isn't just about how often things break. It's about what happens when they do break, and whether you can continue riding or get stranded waiting for a dealer. I've put over 100,000 miles on 1980s motorcycles with breakdowns I can count on one hand. And when those breakdowns occurred, I was able to diagnose and fix them roadside with basic tools. Modern bikes break less often mechanically, but when they fail electronically, they fail completely. A bad sensor can shut down a perfectly good engine. A software glitch can make a bike unrideable. A failed ECU turns a motorcycle into expensive sculpture. This isn't theoretical. I know riders who've been stranded by electronic failures on bikes with less than 5,000 miles. Perfect engines that won't run because a computer says no. The complexity also creates cascade failures. When one electronic system fails on a modern bike, it can affect multiple other systems. A bad ABS sensor might trigger traction control errors, which could affect the engine management system, which might put the bike in limp mode. On a 1980s bike, systems are independent. If the turn signals fail, everything else keeps working perfectly. If the speedometer breaks, it doesn't affect engine performance or braking capability. Here's something that can't be measured in specifications or proven with data, but every experienced rider knows it's true. Modern motorcycles have no soul. They're clinical, sanitized, and designed by committees of engineers who prioritize emissions compliance over riding experience. Every rough edge has been smoothed away. Every visceral sensation has been electronically mediated. The sound has been neutered. Modern bikes, with their catalytic converters and noise regulations, sound like vacuum cleaners compared to the mechanical symphony of 1980s machines. The feel has been isolated. Electronic throttles, traction control, and ABS create a barrier between rider and machine that didn't exist in the 80s. You're not controlling the motorcycle directly, you're making suggestions to the computer about what you'd like to happen. The character has been homogenized. Every modern sport bike feels basically the same because they're all trying to optimize the same performance metrics while meeting the same regulations. 80s bikes had distinct personalities that reflected their manufacturers' different approaches to engineering problems. I can tell you exactly what any 1980s bike will feel like just from looking at it. Modern bikes? They might look completely different, but ride nearly identically because the electronics smooth out all the interesting characteristics. Let's talk about the elephant in the room: money. Motorcycles were supposed to be the affordable alternative to cars. They were simple machines that ordinary people could buy, maintain, and enjoy without breaking the bank. That philosophy is dead. A decent 1980s bike in good condition can be purchased for $3,000 to $8,000. Annual maintenance costs typically run $300 to $500 if you do some work yourself. Parts are readily available and reasonably priced. A modern equivalent costs $15,000 to $25,000 new and depreciates like a stone. Annual maintenance at dealer rates runs $1,500 to $2,500. When something major breaks outside of warranty, repair costs can exceed the bike's value. Insurance costs have also skyrocketed because modern bikes are expensive to repair and impossible for independent shops to work on. Theft is more lucrative because the electronics are valuable on the black market. The hidden costs are even worse. Modern bikes require special tools for basic maintenance, software updates that cost money, diagnostic equipment that only dealers possess, extended warranties that cost thousands because everyone knows these complex machines will fail. Compare this to 1980s bikes where a $200 toolkit and a $30 manual gave you everything needed to maintain the motorcycle for its entire life. Here's the dirty secret the motorcycle industry doesn't want you to know. Modern bikes are designed to become obsolete. Software support ends after a few years. When the manufacturer stops updating the ECU software, your bike becomes increasingly difficult to service and eventually unsupportable. Parts availability is deliberately limited. Manufacturers use proprietary components that can't be rebuilt or substituted. When they discontinue a part, your bike is effectively totaled. Diagnostic equipment becomes obsolete. The scan tools that work on 2020 models might not work on 2025 models, forcing dealers to constantly upgrade expensive equipment and pass those costs on to customers. This is completely different from 1980s bikes, which were designed to be serviceable for decades. The parts that wear out are standard components available from multiple sources. The diagnostic procedures use basic tools that never become obsolete. I can still get parts for any 1980s bike ever made. Try finding ECU components for a 2015 motorcycle in 10 years and see how that works out. Beyond all the practical concerns about reliability and cost, we've lost something more fundamental: the joy of motorcycling. 80s bikes demanded skill and attention. You had to understand how the engine responded to throttle input, how the brakes felt as they heated up, how the chassis behaved at the limit. This created a connection between rider and machine that modern electronics have completely severed. Modern bikes make you a passenger in your own riding experience. Traction control prevents you from feeling the rear tire brake loose. ABS prevents you from understanding brake force modulation. Electronic throttles prevent you from feeling the engine's response to your inputs. The learning curve has been flattened to nothing. Anyone can jump on a modern superbike and ride it fast immediately because the electronics prevent most mistakes. But this means riders never develop the skills that make motorcycling truly rewarding. 80s bikes taught you to be a better rider. Every ride was a lesson in machine dynamics, throttle control, and situational awareness. Modern bikes teach you to trust the computer and ignore the feedback that would make you genuinely skilled. One of the greatest pleasures of motorcycle ownership used to be working on your own bike, understanding how it functioned, maintaining it yourself, and developing the mechanical sympathy that made you a better rider. This relationship has been completely destroyed by modern complexity. I spent last weekend rebuilding the carburetors on my 1982 Honda CB900F. It was therapeutic, educational, and cost about $40 in parts. The bike runs better than new, and I understand it more intimately. Compare this to a modern bike where maintenance means plugging in a computer, downloading software updates, and letting the dealer's diagnostic equipment tell you what needs attention. There's no learning, no satisfaction, no connection to the machine. The skills that made riders self-reliant are no longer relevant. Carburetor tuning, ignition timing, valve adjustment, and electrical troubleshooting have been replaced by proprietary software and dealer-only procedures. We've traded mechanical sympathy for computer dependency, and we're all poorer for it. Let me give you a concrete example that illustrates everything I've been talking about. I own a 1984 Honda VF1000R that I bought new 40 years ago. It has 78,000 miles on it and still runs perfectly. In those 4 decades, it's needed normal maintenance, a few wear items replaced, and one major repair when the cam chain tensioner failed at 45,000 miles. Total cost of ownership, including purchase price, maintenance, and that one major repair? About $12,000 in today's dollars. My friend bought a 2024 CBR1000RR last year. In 12 months and 8,000 miles, he's had 3 warranty repairs, 2 software updates, and 1 complete breakdown that required dealer pickup. His cost so far? $18,000 purchase price, $1,200 in maintenance, and $800 in extended warranty coverage he felt necessary to protect his investment. The new bike is faster, but the old bike is more reliable, cheaper to own, and infinitely more satisfying to maintain and repair. When my VF1000R needs attention, I fix it myself in my garage with tools I've owned for decades. When his CBR needs attention, he makes an appointment, drops it off, and hopes the dealer can figure out what the computer is complaining about. Which bike gives the owner more control, more understanding, and more satisfaction? The answer is obvious. Before anyone brings up environmental concerns, let's address the elephant in the room. Modern bikes, with their emissions equipment and planned obsolescence, are environmental disasters compared to 1980s motorcycles. My 40-year-old bike is still running on its original engine and transmission. It will probably outlast 3 or 4 modern bikes because it was built to be maintained rather than replaced. The environmental cost of manufacturing a new motorcycle every few years far exceeds the emission savings of modern technology, especially when you factor in the electronic components that can't be recycled and the proprietary parts that end up in landfills when they can't be repaired. 80s bikes were designed when materials were expensive and labor was cheap. This encouraged designs that prioritized longevity and repairability. Modern bikes are designed when materials are cheap and labor is expensive, encouraging planned obsolescence and throwaway mentality. A properly maintained 1980s bike will run for 200,000 miles or more. How many modern bikes will still be running in 40 years? Very few, because the electronic components will have failed and become unsupportable long before the mechanical parts wear out. Here's the truth the motorcycle industry desperately wants to hide. They make more money when bikes are complex, unreliable, and impossible to maintain yourself. Simple, reliable bikes are bad for business. They last too long, need too little service, and can be maintained by independent shops or knowledgeable owners. Complex, electronics-laden bikes are profit centers. They require expensive dealer service, proprietary parts, and regular software updates. When they break, only the dealer can fix them. The push toward electronic complexity isn't about making bikes better for riders. It's about creating a captive service market and planned obsolescence that ensures regular replacement sales. This is why manufacturers discontinued simple, reliable designs in favor of electronic complexity. Not because riders demanded it, but because it's more profitable. The shift toward electronic complexity has cost us more than just reliable motorcycles. It's cost us the skills and knowledge that defined motorcycle culture for decades. Older riders remember when mechanical knowledge was part of being a motorcyclist. You learned how engines worked, how to diagnose problems, and how to perform repairs because you had to. This knowledge created a community of self-reliant riders who could help each other and share expertise. It also created better riders because understanding your machine made you more aware of its limits and capabilities. Modern riders have become consumers instead of enthusiasts. They buy bikes, ride them until they break, then take them to dealers for repair. There's no learning, no development of mechanical sympathy, no deep understanding of what makes motorcycles work. We've lost the culture of tinkering, modifying, and personalizing that made motorcycling special. Modern bikes discourage modification because any changes might affect the integrated electronics or void warranties. I'm not against all progress. Some modern improvements like better tires, improved metallurgy, and superior lubricants have genuinely made motorcycles better. But we didn't have to sacrifice reliability, maintainability, and soul to get those improvements. The industry chose electronic complexity because it's more profitable, not because it's better for riders. The 1980s represented a path not taken. We could have continued developing simple, reliable, mechanically pure motorcycles while incorporating the best modern materials and manufacturing techniques. Instead, we got computers on wheels that prioritize marketing specifications over real-world usefulness. If I could only own one motorcycle for the rest of my life, it would be a 1980s bike. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because those bikes represent the pinnacle of what motorcycles can be when they're designed for riders instead of profit margins. They're reliable enough to depend on, simple enough to understand, and pure enough to provide the unfiltered riding experience that modern bikes have forgotten how to deliver. The golden age of motorcycling ended 40 years ago. We've been moving backward ever since, and it's time we admitted it. Now I want to hear from you, because I know this video is going to be controversial. Do you agree that modern bikes have sacrificed too much in the pursuit of technological advancement? Or do you think I'm just an old guy who refuses to embrace progress? Have you experienced the electronic failures and dealer dependency I've described? Or have modern bikes been reliable for you? Are you old enough to remember 1980s bikes? How do they compare to what you're riding today? Share your experiences in the comments. Let's have an honest discussion about what we've gained and what we've lost in 4 decades of motorcycle development. Hit like if you agree that simpler was better, or if this video made you think differently about modern motorcycle design. Subscribe for more controversial takes on motorcycle culture, industry trends, and the lessons we can learn from the bikes that built our passion. And remember, the best motorcycle is one that serves its rider, not its manufacturer's profit margins.